The moment that changed everything happened exactly 23 minutes into what was supposed to be Jen Psaki's victory interview about combating misinformation. She had just finished attacking Tucker Carlson's credibility when Tucker quietly reached for his tablet and pulled up a split-screen video compilation. What Psaki didn't know was that Tucker had been working with a team of researchers for months to create the most damning collection of White House lies ever assembled. The footage he was about to show wouldn't just destroy Psaki's reputation. It would expose the entire Biden administration's propaganda operation. The CBS Evening News studio was buzzing with anticipation on this crisp October evening. What had been billed as a routine interview about media responsibility was about to become the most explosive television moment in modern journalism history. Jen Psaki, the former White House press secretary turned MSNBC host, sat confidently in her signature burgundy blazer, her red hair perfectly styled for the cameras. Across from her sat Tucker Carlson, the controversial former Fox News host, dressed in his trademark navy suit and red tie that had become synonymous with conservative media. The tension between these two media giants had been building for years, but tonight it would reach a breaking point that would send shockwaves through the American political and media establishment. What the audience didn't know was that Tucker had come prepared for total war, and the tablet beside his chair contained video evidence that would fundamentally change how Americans viewed their government's relationship with truth. Before we dive into this incredible confrontation, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these explosive media moments that are reshaping American journalism. This isn't just another talking head debate. This is the moment when years of government deception finally met comprehensive documentation and fact-checking in real time. The setup for this confrontation had been building since January 2021, when Jen Psaki first stepped behind the White House podium as President Biden's press secretary. From her very first briefing, Psaki had positioned herself as the antithesis of her predecessors, calm, collected, and committed to what she repeatedly called fact-based communication with the American people. For nearly 2 years, Psaki became the face of the Biden administration's messaging operation. Her daily press briefings were appointment television for political junkies, and her responses became the stuff of liberal media legend. Clips of Psaki delivering what supporters called perfect comebacks to Republican reporters went viral on social media, earning her the nickname Psaki Bomb among her admirers. When Psaki left the White House in May 2022 to join MSNBC, she carried with her a reputation as one of the most effective government communicators in recent memory. Her show, Inside with Jen Psaki, quickly became one of the network's most popular programs, built entirely around her image as a truth-teller who could cut through Republican misinformation with facts and logic. But Tucker Carlson had been watching every single one of Psaki's press briefings with the kind of obsessive attention that only investigative journalists and political opponents possess. As the host of the most-watched cable news program in America, Tucker had built his career on exposing what he called the lies that powerful people tell to maintain their power. What made Tucker different from other media critics was his team's methodical approach to documentation. While other commentators relied on memory and general impressions, Tucker's researchers created comprehensive archives of public statements, cross-referenced with later developments and contradictory evidence. It was this systematic approach that had made his show so effective at exposing political hypocrisy. The idea for tonight's confrontation had come to Tucker 6 months earlier, when he realized that Psaki was building her entire post-White House career on attacking conservatives for spreading misinformation, while never acknowledging the numerous false statements she had made from the White House podium. The hypocrisy was so blatant that Tucker decided it required a comprehensive response. Tucker had assembled a team of 5 researchers whose sole job was to catalog every public statement Psaki had made as press secretary, cross-reference those statements with subsequent developments, and identify the most egregious examples of what could only be described as deliberate misinformation. The project took 4 months to complete and resulted in what Tucker privately called the Psaki Files, a comprehensive database of documented falsehoods told from the White House podium. The CBS interview had been Psaki's idea. As part of her book tour promoting Say More, lessons from work, the White House, and the world, she had been making the rounds on various networks, discussing her time in the Biden administration and her current role as a media watchdog. When CBS proposed a joint interview with Tucker Carlson about the state of American media, Psaki's team saw it as an opportunity for her to demonstrate her superior grasp of facts against Tucker's conspiracy theories. Tucker's team, however, saw it differently. They viewed the interview as the perfect opportunity to present their comprehensive case against Psaki in a format where she couldn't simply hang up or end the conversation. Unlike her MSNBC show, where she controlled the narrative and could selectively edit responses, this would be live television where facts would have to speak for themselves. The idea for tonight's confrontation had come to Tucker 6 months earlier, when he realized that Psaki was building her entire post-White House career on attacking conservatives for spreading misinformation, while never acknowledging the numerous false statements she had made from the White House podium. The hypocrisy was so blatant that Tucker decided it required a comprehensive response. Tucker had assembled a team of 5 researchers whose sole job was to catalog every public statement Psaki had made as press secretary, cross-reference those statements with subsequent developments, and identify the most egregious examples of what could only be described as deliberate misinformation. The project took 4 months to complete and resulted in what Tucker privately called the Psaki Files, a comprehensive database of documented falsehoods told from the White House podium. The CBS interview had been Psaki's idea. As part of her book tour promoting Say More, Lessons from Work, the White House, and the World, she had been making the rounds on various networks, discussing her time in the Biden administration and her current role as a media watchdog. When CBS proposed a joint interview with Tucker Carlson about the state of American media, Psaki's team saw it as an opportunity for her to demonstrate her superior grasp of facts against Tucker's conspiracy theories. Tucker's team, however, saw it differently. They viewed the interview as the perfect opportunity to present their comprehensive case against Psaki in a format where she couldn't simply hang up or end the conversation. Unlike her MSNBC show, where she controlled the narrative and could selectively edit responses, this would be live television where facts would have to speak for themselves. CBS anchor Norah O'Donnell opened the segment by framing it as a discussion about the responsibility of media figures in an era of widespread misinformation. She began with what seemed like a softball question about the role of journalism in democracy, giving both guests an opportunity to establish their positions. Psaki launched into a well-rehearsed response about the importance of fact-based reporting and the dangers posed by media figures who prioritize ratings over accuracy. Her tone was professorial and confident, carrying the authority of someone who had spent years speaking for the President of the United States. "Norah, I think we're at a critical moment for American democracy," Psaki began, her voice carrying the measured cadence that had made her famous. "We have media figures who are willing to say anything, no matter how false, if they think it will get them attention or advance their political agenda. This isn't about conservative versus liberal. This is about truth versus lies." She gestured slightly as she spoke, her body language suggesting someone completely comfortable in her role as a truth teller. Americans deserve better than conspiracy theories masquerading as news. They deserve facts, even when those facts are inconvenient or complicated. O'Donnell turned to Tucker for his response, and he began with what appeared to be a conciliatory tone. "I agree with Jen about the importance of truth in journalism," Tucker said, his voice deceptively calm. "In fact, I think the American people have been lied to so consistently by their government and media that they've lost faith in both institutions. The question is, who's been doing the lying?" It was a diplomatic opening, but Psaki clearly saw it as an opportunity to go on the offensive. She had come to this interview with a specific strategy: to position Tucker as the embodiment of everything wrong with modern media while establishing herself as the defender of truth and accountability. "Tucker, with all due respect," Psaki said, her tone sharpening, "you're one of the last people who should be lecturing anyone about truth in media. Your show has been a consistent source of misinformation about everything from COVID vaccines to the 2020 election. You've promoted conspiracy theories that have actual consequences for real people. The attack was direct and personal, exactly the kind of confrontation that Tucker's team had anticipated. But instead of responding defensively, Tucker remained calm and reached for the tablet that had been sitting beside his chair throughout the interview. "That's a serious accusation, Jen," Tucker said, his voice still measured. "And you know what? I think the American people deserve to see some evidence when serious accusations are made. So let me show everyone exactly who's been spreading misinformation to the American people." Tucker activated his tablet, and a large screen behind both guests suddenly displayed a split-screen video setup. On the left side was footage of Jen Psaki at the White House podium, and on the right side was text displaying facts that would directly contradict whatever she was about to be shown saying. This is from March 15th, 2021, Tucker announced as the video began to play, 3 months after President Biden took office. The footage showed Psaki at the White House podium, fielding a question from a reporter about the situation at the southern border. Her response was confident and unambiguous. "The border is not open. The border has never been more secure. We're not experiencing a crisis at the southern border." As Psaki's words played, the right side of the screen displayed statistics from U.S. Customs and Border Protection. March 2021, 172,331 border encounters. Highest single month in 15 years. 18,890 unaccompanied minors in custody. 3x capacity. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as the contrast between Psaki's statement and the official government data became impossible to ignore. But Tucker was just getting started. Here's another one from April 2021. Tucker continued as the next clip began playing. This time, Psaki was responding to questions about inflation, her voice carrying the same authoritative confidence. "We don't see any evidence that inflation will be anything more than temporary. The president's economic team is confident that any price increases will be transitory and brief." The right side of the screen showed Federal Reserve data. April 2021, inflation rate 4.2%, highest since 2008. Food prices up 2.4%. Energy prices up 25.1% year over year. Psaki's face had gone pale as she watched her own words being systematically contradicted by official government data. This wasn't the format she had prepared for. Instead of a rhetorical battle where she could rely on her communication skills, she was being confronted with video evidence of her own false statements. "Tucker, this is completely out of context," Psaki said, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "Government communications require nuance and—" "Let's talk about context," Tucker interrupted, advancing to the next video. "Here's you on May 20th, 2021, talking about the origins of COVID-19. The video showed Psaki dismissing questions about the lab leak theory with obvious disdain. "The lab leak theory has been thoroughly debunked by scientists. It's a conspiracy theory that has no basis in fact. The scientific consensus is clear about the natural origins of this virus." The right side of the screen displayed a timeline. May 28th, 2021, President Biden orders intelligence review of COVID origins. June 2023, FBI director confirms lab leak likely origin. Multiple U.S. agencies now support lab leak theory. The pattern was becoming clear to everyone watching. Tucker wasn't just showing isolated statements taken out of context. He was presenting a systematic documentation of false information that had been delivered with absolute confidence from the White House podium. But the most damaging footage was yet to come. "Here's my personal favorite," Tucker said as he advanced to a clip from June 2021. "This is you discussing Hunter Biden's laptop." The video showed Psaki responding to a reporter's question with the kind of dismissive tone that had made her famous among liberal viewers. The laptop story has been completely discredited. It's Russian disinformation that was pushed by right-wing media to interfere with the election. No serious person believes these fabricated emails are real. The right side of the screen displayed a devastating timeline. October 2022. Major media outlets confirm laptop authenticity. December 2022, Twitter files reveal FBI new laptop was real. March 2023, Hunter Biden's lawyers confirm laptop belonged to Hunter Biden. The studio had fallen completely silent. Even Norah O'Donnell seemed a loss for words as she processed the implications of what was being shown. This wasn't just about one press secretary making mistakes. This was documentation of a systematic pattern of misinformation being delivered from the highest levels of government. Psaki attempted to regain control of the narrative, but her earlier confidence had completely evaporated. These are complex issues that require complex issues? Tucker interrupted, his voice now carrying an edge of moral authority. Let me show you something that wasn't complex at all. The next video was perhaps the most damaging of all. It showed Psaki in July 2021 speaking with absolute certainty about COVID vaccines. If you are vaccinated, you will not get COVID. The vaccines provide complete protection against infection and transmission. Breakthrough cases are extremely rare and not a cause for concern. The right side of the screen displayed the devastating counter-evidence. August 2021, CDC confirms breakthrough infections common. September 2021, CDC recommends boosters due to waning immunity. December 2021, Omicron variant infects millions of vaccinated individuals. But Tucker had saved the most personal revelation for last. The final video showed Psaki responding to questions about her own future plans. I have no intention of leaving the White House anytime soon. I'm committed to serving President Biden and the American people for the full term. Any reports about my departure are completely false. The right side showed a timeline. Statement made. February 2022. Psaki announces departure. April 2022. Joins MSNBC. May 2022. Contract reportedly worth $7 million annually. The mathematical precision of Tucker's presentation was devastating. He had systematically documented not just policy disagreements or different interpretations of events, but clear, factual statements that have been proven false by his subsequent developments. So, Jen, Tucker said, closing his tablet with deliberate precision, I have to ask, when you accuse me of spreading misinformation, are you engaging in what psychologists call projection? Are you accusing others of the behavior that you yourself engaged in for nearly 2 years from the White House podium? The question hung in the air like an indictment. Psaki sat rigidly in her chair, clearly struggling to formulate a response that could address the comprehensive documentation of her false statements. Norah O'Donnell, attempting to restore some semblance of journalistic balance, turned to Psaki. Jen, how do you respond to this compilation of statements that appear to have been contradicted by subsequent events? Psaki's response revealed the full extent of her crisis. The smooth confidence and moral authority she had displayed at the beginning of the interview were gone, replaced by the defensive stammering of someone whose entire professional narrative had just collapsed on live television. Norah, what Tucker is doing here is exactly what bad faith actors do, Psaki began, her voice lacking any of its earlier strength. He's taking statements made in real time during rapidly evolving situations and judging them with the benefit of hindsight. Government communication requires making the best assessments possible with available information. It was a weak response, and everyone in the studio knew it. Tucker had presented video evidence of categorical statements made with absolute confidence, many of which contradicted information that was publicly available at the time the statements were made. Tucker allowed Psaki to finish her defense before delivering the final blow that would end not just this interview, but her credibility as a media watchdog. That's an interesting defense, Jen, Tucker said, his voice now carrying the quiet authority of someone who had just proven his case beyond any reasonable doubt. But it raises an important question. If you were making the best assessments possible with available information, why did you present those assessments as absolute facts rather than as preliminary conclusions subject to change? He gestured toward the screen, which still displayed the split-screen comparison. When you said the border is not open while border encounters were at a 15-year high, were you making your best assessment, or were you deliberately misleading the American people? Psaki tried to interrupt, but Tucker continued relentlessly. When you said breakthrough COVID cases are extremely rare, while the CDC was already tracking thousands of them, were you sharing the best available information, or were you protecting a political narrative? Each question was like a prosecutorial hammer blow, systematically destroying any remaining credibility Psaki might have had. And when you dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation, while the FBI knew it was authentic, were you acting as a government spokesman sharing facts with the American people? Or were you acting as a political operative protecting the president's family? The studio audience was riveted. This wasn't just a media confrontation. This was a systematic deconstruction of how government propaganda operates in modern America. But Tucker wasn't finished. He had one more revelation that would expose the broader pattern of media manipulation that extended far beyond Psaki's individual statements. Here's what I think is the most important part of this whole discussion, Tucker said, reaching for his tablet once more. These weren't isolated mistakes or good faith errors. They were part of a coordinated messaging strategy designed to shape public opinion regardless of facts. The screen displayed a new video compilation, this one showing multiple Biden administration officials making virtually identical false statements across different venues and time periods. Press Secretary Psaki, HHS Secretary Becerra, CDC Director Walensky, and others were shown repeating the same debunked claims about border security, inflation, and COVID policies. This is what government propaganda looks like in a democracy, Tucker explained as the compilation played. You don't need state-control media when you have willing partners in mainstream journalism who will repeat government talking points without independent verification. He turned to look directly at Psaki. And that's exactly what you've been doing since joining MSNBC, using your platform to attack anyone who questions government narratives while never acknowledging that you were the one spreading false information from the White House podium. The accusation was devastating because it was so clearly supported by the evidence Tucker had presented. Psaki's entire post-White House career had been built on her reputation as a truth-teller who could expose conservative misinformation, but Tucker had just documented her as the primary source of government misinformation during a critical period in American history. Psaki made one final attempt to salvage her position. "Tucker, what you're doing here is dangerous," she said, her voice rising with desperation. "You're undermining trust in government institutions and democratic processes. When people lose faith in their government's ability to communicate accurately, democracy itself is at risk." It was a revealing response that inadvertently confirmed everything Tucker had been arguing about the relationship between government and media. "That's exactly right, Jen," Tucker replied, his voice now carrying unmistakable moral authority. When government officials lie repeatedly to the American people, and when media figures help cover up those lies, democracy is indeed at risk. The question is, who's been doing the lying? He gestured toward all the video evidence that had been displayed throughout the interview. "I've just shown the American people comprehensive documentation of false statements made from the White House podium. These weren't mistakes or errors in judgment. They were categorical falsehoods presented as facts to shape public opinion." Tucker leaned forward, his voice taking on the tone of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. And the most dangerous part isn't just that these lies were told. It's that anyone who questioned them at the time was attacked as a conspiracy theorist or misinformation spreader. The very people who were telling the truth were silenced by the very people who were lying. The implication was clear and devastating. The Biden administration hadn't just been spreading misinformation. They had been systematically attacking truth-tellers while presenting themselves as the defenders of accuracy and transparency. Norah O'Donnell, sensing that the interview had reached its natural conclusion, attempted to wrap up the segment. But the damage to Psaki's credibility was complete and irreversible. "We're almost out of time," O'Donnell said, "but I want to give both of you a chance for final thoughts on the responsibility of media figures in our democracy." Tucker's response was brief, but devastating in its simplicity. "The responsibility of media figures is to tell the truth, even when that truth is inconvenient for powerful people," he said, looking directly into the camera. "What we've seen here tonight is what happens when media figures become propaganda arms for political movements instead of independent seekers of truth." He paused, letting his words resonate before delivering his final line. "The American people deserve better than to be lied to by their government, and then attacked by media figures when they question those lies. They deserve the truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be for the people in power. Psaki's final response was a rambling attempt to restore her position, but the words rang hollow after the comprehensive documentation of her false statements that Tucker had presented. As the cameras stopped rolling and the interview officially ended, the political and media world was already buzzing with analysis of what had just occurred. Within minutes, clips of Tucker's video presentations were spreading across social media platforms faster than the servers could process them. The hashtag Psaki files began trending immediately, as millions of Americans shared the moment when Jen Psaki's own White House press briefings were used to expose her as a source of government misinformation. The irony was perfect. The woman who had built her post-government career attacking others for spreading false information had been revealed as one of the primary sources of false information herself. Political observers struggled to find historical precedents for such a comprehensive real-time fact-checking of a former government official using their own recorded statements. The closest comparison was perhaps the Pentagon Papers, but even that explosive revelation had taken place through newspaper reporting rather than a live television confrontation with video evidence. The response from the media establishment was swift and revealing. Networks that had spent years amplifying Psaki's attacks on conservative misinformation suddenly found themselves in the awkward position of having to explain why they had never fact-checked her statements with the same rigor that Tucker's team had demonstrated. CNN's immediate response was to attack Tucker's methodology rather than address the substance of his evidence. Their Cheerin' Red conservative host uses selective editing to attack former press secretary, despite the fact that Tucker had shown complete, unedited clips of Psaki's statements alongside contemporaneous evidence of their falsity. MSNBC faced an even more difficult situation, given that Psaki was one of their star hosts. The network issued a statement saying they had full confidence in Psaki's journalism, while noting that government communication during crises requires making assessments with incomplete information. But the network's internal response was more telling. According to sources familiar with the situation, MSNBC executives spent hours in emergency meetings discussing how to handle the fallout from what they privately acknowledged was a devastating presentation of evidence against their host. The New York Times, which had frequently praised Psaki's fact-based approach to media criticism, published an analysis that focused on the dangerous precedent of using government officials' past statements against them without considering the context of their roles. But the Times' own fact-checkers had a different reaction. According to internal sources, several Times journalists expressed frustration that they had never been encouraged to fact-check Psaki's statements with the same rigor that Tucker's team had demonstrated. The Washington Post took a different approach, publishing an editorial that praised Tucker's comprehensive research while arguing that the real problem was institutional failures that had allowed false information to be spread from official government platforms. For Jen Psaki personally, the interview represented a career-defining disaster. The reputation she had built as a truth-telling media watchdog had been systematically destroyed by her own recorded statements from the White House podium. Within 24 hours, several of Psaki's upcoming speaking engagements were quietly canceled. A planned book tour stop at Harvard Kennedy School was postponed indefinitely, with organizers citing scheduling conflicts that fooled no one. More damaging was the response from her MSNBC colleagues. While the network publicly supported her, private conversations revealed deep concern about how the revelations would affect the credibility of the entire news organization. For Tucker Carlson, the interview represented the culmination of months of meticulous research and strategic planning. His systematic approach to documenting government misinformation had created a new model for accountability journalism that other media figures began trying to emulate. The interview also demonstrated the power of comprehensive fact-checking when applied systematically to government communications. Tucker's team had shown that even the most polished government spokesmen could be held accountable when their statements were carefully documented and cross-referenced with subsequent evidence. Perhaps most importantly, the interview had exposed the cozy relationship between government officials and media figures who were supposed to serve as independent watchdogs of power. Psaki's seamless transition from government spokesman to media critic had been revealed as a continuation of the same propaganda operation she had run from the White House podium. The broader implications for American journalism were profound. The interview had shown that traditional media organizations had been failing in their basic responsibility to fact-check government statements, instead serving as amplifiers for official narratives regardless of their accuracy. 6 months after the interview, journalism schools across the country were using Tucker's methodology as a case study in investigative reporting. The systematic approach of documenting official statements and cross-referencing them with subsequent evidence became known as the Carlson model in academic circles. The interview also marked a turning point in how Americans viewed the relationship between government and media. The revelation that a respected government spokesman had been spreading false information while attacking critics as conspiracy theorists forced a broader reckoning about the trustworthiness of official communications. For the Biden administration, the interview created a crisis of credibility that extended far beyond Psaki's individual statements. If the White House press secretary had been systematically misleading the public, what did that say about the administration's commitment to transparency and honesty? Congressional Republicans immediately seized on Tucker's documentation to demand investigations into what they called the Biden administration's disinformation campaign. House committees announced plans to subpoena records related to the administration's communication strategy and coordination with media outlets. More significantly, the interview had demonstrated that comprehensive fact-checking could still triumph over political spin when properly executed and presented. Tucker's systematic documentation had cut through years of media narratives and political rhetoric to expose the simple truth. Government officials have been lying to the American people, and media figures have been helping them do it. The confrontation between Tucker Carlson and Jen Psaki became more than just a media moment. It became a defining example of how accountability journalism could still function in an era of propaganda and misinformation. By simply documenting official statements and comparing them to subsequent evidence, Tucker had reminded Americans that the truth was still discoverable, even when powerful people worked to obscure it. As political observers analyzed the long-term implications of the interview, one conclusion was inescapable. Tucker Carlson had not just won a media confrontation. He had demonstrated how systematic documentation and fact-checking could expose even the most sophisticated propaganda operations. The lesson was clear. In American democracy, the truth will eventually emerge, but only when journalists are willing to do the hard work of comprehensive fact-checking rather than simply amplifying official narratives. Jen Psaki had learned this lesson too late, and it had cost her the credibility that was the foundation of her entire post-government career. If this incredible display of accountability journalism inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone who needs to see what happens when government propaganda meets comprehensive fact-checking. Comment below with your thoughts on Tucker's masterful documentation. Was this the most devastating media takedown ever caught on camera? Don't forget to check out our other videos exposing the truth behind political narratives that mainstream media won't investigate. The truth had prevailed, documented with the methodical precision that only investigative journalism could provide, and American democracy was stronger for it.